Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're continuing our coverage. Is it coverage? That feels like a good word.
Sure. Coverage feels like a live, like we're a news outlet covering something, you know, as it happens. This book is 8 years old, so.
Yeah, we're covering this 8-year-old thing live.
Yeah, it's new to us. It's real to me.
It's real to me. That's a classic internet meme. I love that so much. Okay, so we're talking about Console Wars today. We're going to go through chapters 5 and through 11. Last week I said we were going to go through 10, and then I realized that chapter 11 is 2 pages long.
Yeah, so we can fit that in. I think we can squeeze it all in.
I think we can squeeze that in. Yeah, we'll be fine. So with that, we're going to start with chapter 5. And this, you just made a good point. In that chapter 5, which is called The History of Nintendo of America, a story told in 8 bits, this is where we get the textbook style explanation.
Yeah, this is not told in like a narrative format the way that the rest of the book is, or the chapters that are about Tom Kalinske where he's like the protagonist and like it's sort of told in a very storytelling style. This is much more textbook of like we have to get the context of the formation of Nintendo out of the way. So they do that. And this chapter is like it's like as long as all of the books so far combined, I think.
Yeah.
It's so long. It's just like they just vomit out the entire history of Nintendo just because it's necessary for context when we start going back and forth between Sega and Nintendo.
Yeah, and it gives you good context. And I would say I think this is the most comprehensive thing I've read about the early days of Nintendo, like the trading card days.
It goes all the way back. It spends actually a pretty decent amount of time on the trading card stuff, which I thought was really interesting. What I liked was the Hanafuda cards are the same as like regular playing cards, like Western playing cards, I guess you should say, like, you know, the spade, diamond, the other two. I don't play a lot of card games.
Spade, diamond, clubs and hearts.
Hearts, that's what it is. Yeah, okay. But they're so there's and then you've got numbers 1 through 10 plus 4 more, so there's I guess 14 different kinds of cards in each of the suits. But Hanafuda cards are like the same, except for their seasons instead of like the suits that we have, and then their months of the year instead of like the numbers. So you could still play like kind of the same card games with Hanafuda cards, which were legal in Japan at the time when Western playing cards were not legal.
Yeah, and they go through like the legality changes because they were legal and then they were illegal, and then they finally let it go and they came back again. And it's really great because it talks about how Yamauchi, this is Fusajiro Yamauchi, does that sound right?
Yeah.
Matt will tell me if I get it wrong. That started out like selling these cards to people, but he really made most of his money when he realized that you sell them to casinos.
Yeah.
Because casinos use a deck and then throw it away.
They got to crack open new decks all the time.
Yeah, and that's where the business took off. I like this a lot. It kind of gave me some more context, too, into how they got into it. And then also that Hiroshi Yamauchi was like very much wanted to carve his own path, and that's kind of how they got into electronic games.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. It's an interesting like story of a company that's being made and then sort of passed down through the generations because the Yamauchis would pass it down like to the son or whatever. And then that son would then take a different route with the company sometimes. Like, you know, like in the 50s, they were still making playing cards. And then that's when they sort of, when the hands changed to, I forget who it was that they handed it to, but he started doing the toys and all the other stuff. And it is interesting a way to see these really old companies that like start out doing one thing. That's how they end up like pivoting is because leadership changes. And then that person has a different vision for what the company can do, which I find that interesting. Rather than like that person say, "Oh, you know what? I don't want to make playing cards anymore. I don't want to go into the playing card business. I want to go into the toy business." They could just start their own company that's a toy company, but not at this point in time. At least not for Nintendo. I don't know if that's typical of like older Japanese businesses like that, but I just thought that was interesting that it was like leadership changes that prompted the shift to other sectors.
Yeah. I also like that they talk about their duds, like Monkey Magic and Block Fever.
Yeah, Nintendo made a lot of really bad video games. Like probably smart money in like the 70s was like, Nintendo, you gotta stop making games. These are bad.
Yeah, and they talk about at the end of the section the Color TV Game 15, which is 15 slightly different versions of electronic tennis.
Yeah, because this was at the point in time where like video games were just Pong. That's all it meant.
It's all
like,
Pong.
I've got video games that's just all Pong and variations on Pong, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, like so Nintendo didn't just like come out and like they didn't just show up in 1984 with NES or 1985 or whatever with the NES and like just blow the doors off of things. Like they made a lot of really bad video games for like a long time, and they just kept putting money into this, which I thought was interesting. Like somebody else might have just been like, after a string of bad games, they would have just been like, you know what, maybe this isn't our thing. Maybe we don't do this, you know?
And the rest of this chapter, we're going to kind of gloss over a little bit because we've covered a lot of this history on Ultimate History Video Games book coverage with, we're talking about Minoru Arakawa, Al Stone, Ron Judy, Shigeru Miyamoto, Howard Lincoln, like all that stuff we covered. The only little like highlight I wanted to go over is the section at the end with Nintendo Power, because I feel like they covered Nintendo Power a little bit in Ultimate History Video Games.
Yeah.
But this gives it a little bit more. And I love the story. It's just such a nice story.
I love Nintendo Power, man. I got my first issue of Nintendo Power in like 1998. It was the Banjo-Kazooie issue. And I think I continued getting Nintendo Power for like with a few stops maybe in it. But I think I got it up until the end. Like I was reading it every month for a long time as a kid, man. That was a great magazine. It was like the only way to get game news before the internet, you know? Or at least Nintendo news. And at this point in my life, I didn't see beyond Nintendo as for anything video games. I had like heard of the PlayStation, and like Xbox was sort of on the horizon. Sega was the enemy. I wasn't interested in Sega, you know. But this was also back in the days where like games were for kids and they were very expensive. They still are expensive, but they were very expensive then as well. And like you only got one. You got one or the other. Most kids got one or the other, right? And so you kind of had to dig your heels in on whichever one you had.
Yeah, exactly. You were like, I'm Team Nintendo or I'm Team Sega.
Yeah.
It was the pre-console wars, if you will. The old, well, I mean, I guess I feel like if you asked a kid now what the console wars are, they would say Xbox versus PlayStation.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But this was the original console wars. I guess you say console wars 1.
Yeah.
That's really what it was. The part I wanted to talk about specifically, and I don't know if you're like this part in the book you remember, but I love that Arakawa sees so much in Gail Tilden, like talent, that he asks, like, he kind of like calls her into the office while she's on maternity leave to be like, you're the only one that could make Nintendo Power. This is you. This is your story.
Yeah.
I love that about
this. Because they had like a newsletter, right? That people would sign up for the newsletter.
Million subscribers to the newsletter or something.
Yeah.
And then not to mention they had the helpline, which they had to hire 500 people because they were getting 150,000 calls.
It was free too for a while. I remember they had that the game counselors thing for a long time. I remember seeing ads for it in Nintendo Power magazine. They had that for a really long time, but it did not stay free. It was like it got really expensive. I want to say like $1.50 a minute or something. At least that's a price I remember. I didn't double check that, but
yeah, I remember watching. I think it's the Netflix documentary, the series. Is it Game On?
Yeah.
They talk about this, specifically the call center, and they show like video of the call center, and it really was just a bunch of people in front of Nintendos and SNESs, and they're just playing games while talking to people about the game they're playing. And they have these giant manuals that they go through to like help people. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing what people did before the internet.
Yep. And now all of that goes away. People just you can only watch YouTube videos now. Nobody writes guides anymore. I like a good written guide with screenshots, you know? Nobody does that anymore. It's all YouTube videos and it's like 15 minutes long. And I just want to see what do I do next. I don't want to see an entire walkthrough of the level. I just want to know where it's just help me get unstuck. And it's so hard to like move through a YouTube video. I've been having trouble. I've been playing Dark Forces lately, and that is it's Star Wars Doom, and the levels are so big and just maze like that I can't find a freaking map. That's all I want is a map. The game has a built-in map, but it's kind of hard to use. I just want a map, and all I can find are like 20-minute level walkthroughs on YouTube. Ugh, They got to watch from the beginning because if I just click somewhere in the middle, I'm not going to know if it's before or after where I am.
Yeah, they just keep asking you to smash the like button, and you're like,
I
I
know.
don't want to smash the like button. I
The
just
like
want to
button's
know
in
where this
pieces
is.
on the floor.
It's broken.
I'm not going to subscribe to you for more Dark Forces videos.
This is a very niche game. So niche. All right. I think like the next chapter. So chapter 6 is called The Name of the Game. And that's when we're getting like pretty exciting stuff. We're getting rumblings of what the mascot's going to be. Right. We're getting Al Nilsson has this kind of like grizzled war veteran vibe story about E.T. that he tells Kalinske.
Yeah. E.T. the game.
Because he has a framed copy of E.T., right? That's what it is.
Yeah, and he picked it up for like $2, and on the frame you can see the stickers marking it down like $49.99, $29.99, $19.99, $5.99, $2.99. Like,
oh yeah, this is great, and I love this chapter too because it's the first business meeting really of them coming back together.
Yeah,
and this is where they decide to go to Walmart. They have a plan. They have a mission. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Gotta go to Walmart.
You gotta go to Walmart. And it's also funny to me because you learn about this distribution thing with Tonka. And is that like Tonka Trucks?
Yeah, I think it's the same company. I mean, they do a lot more than just trucks, but yeah.
Yeah.
Big old toy company.
Big old toy company. And so that was a disastrous distribution deal where it just didn't work out the way they wanted it to. And so then they're going to Walmart. But this chapter just seemed like kind of the setup for the next thing.
Yeah.
Which is this meeting with Walmart, which is called Chapter 7. It's Postcards from Arkansas. It's very short, this chapter. And I feel like the whole reason it's in the book is to tell the Tengen story.
Yeah, which is a good story. We've talked about it before, but that's the story of the Tengen, the company that wanted to they were owned by Atari and they wanted to make games for Nintendo. They wanted to get away from the rules that Nintendo imposed on everybody. Because this is in the late 80s, early 90s, Nintendo imposed huge rules on their developers of like, you can only make 5 games a year. You can't make games for any other systems. Deal with it because we're Nintendo and we're the best.
You also had to buy your own cartridges, which were sold for $10 a piece from Nintendo.
Yeah,
it was very expensive to license game with them.
Yeah, you couldn't make your own cartridges. And so Tengen was like, we don't want to follow your rules, so we're going to make our own games without our deal with you. But they had to get around the whole lockout chip, the 10NES lockout chip, because Nintendo had a whole system for making sure that unauthorized cartridges wouldn't play on NES systems, so getting around that's a whole thing. And then once they got around that, then it was a little bit easier. And this is a sort of a prelude to a story later. Maybe this is in the same chapter. No, I think it's a couple chapters later when EA starts making games for the Genesis because they do a similar thing where they get around. Sega has similar sort of guidelines, although they had to be a little bit more relaxed around their guidelines for the Genesis because EA figures out how to get around their lockout chips.
I can't wait to talk about that chapter.
Manufacture their own cartridges. Because that's why the EA cartridges look so different, at least on early Genesis games, because they made their own.
Yeah. Trip Hawkins does not look like the hero of that story in that chapter. He looks like a jerk. The one thing that I kind of love about this chapter about Postcards from Arkansas is you see Kalinske trying to he gives it his all as a salesman.
Mm-hmm.
For pitching, and it doesn't work out because the guy's just like, they tell a story about the place that dropped their Nintendo cartridges by 5 cents, and then Nintendo's just like, oh no, we have no inventory for you. Like that's kind of how they would do it. It feels very mob-like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is this like a whole boy, this is a nice shelf space here, would be a shame if you weren't able to fill it.
You're like, oh, you dropped your cartridges by 5 cents, and now all our cartridges just fell off the truck at the last store. We have no more cartridges for you.
Yeah, but somehow all the other the other stores that didn't lower their prices by 5 cents, wow, there's a whole bunch of extra cartridges for everybody here.
Weird.
Yeah, how about that? Huh. Well, too bad about those ones that fell off the truck.
Yeah. It's just, it makes me realize I never want to be a salesman, this chapter.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. The rejection that you go through here, I'd be like, I get rejected one time and I'd be like, well, I guess nobody in the entire world wants to buy my video game. I'm out.
Yeah, it's rough. So That's chapter 7. The next chapter is chapter 8, and this is called The Birth of an Icon, and that icon is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, man, what a good story here.
I love that it starts, because if you didn't know, Sonic originally had big fangs, an electric guitar, and a girlfriend named Madonna.
They're like trying to do the edgy, like opposite of Mario, and this is the 90s when edgy is in.
Yeah, edgy is so in. And I mean, they do end up getting edgy, but we'll talk about that in like chapter 10. But they just go way over the top with Sonic. And this is Sega of Japan. This is them making the initial design. And this chapter, I think, also gives us the first showing of tensions between Sega of America and Sega of Japan with the fight over this look of Sonic. And it involves Madeline Schroeder, who is one of the people that works like directly under Kalinske, going and trying to like make Sonic less of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, because Sega Japan had one idea that they wanted Sonic to be this certain level of edginess, and then in Sega of America, it's like, this is not going to work here in America. You can't do it like this. It's not too edgy, but it's just like too cheesy, I guess. Like the fangs and the electric guitars, like this is a parody of edginess at this point. And we're going to need to we got to walk it back a little bit here. The thing that I love about this is I think it's in this chapter when Kalinske sort of they talk about how Kalinske thinks that like a hunk of plastic for an action figure, right? It's just a hunk of plastic. So what do you need to sell action figures to kids or dolls to kids or whatever? You need a story behind that thing, like a story of who this action figure is. What are their friends like? What do they do? Like, what do they stand for? Those kinds of things. That's what sells the hunk of plastic, because action figures and dolls are all the same. They're all made of plastic. They all do the same stuff, right? And so that's what Kalinske's like trying to get at here is he's like, we have to have a good story for Sonic the Hedgehog to sell to people because, anybody can make a mascot.
Yeah, and that's a great moment because they take a trip to Toys R Us, which man, that gave me some nostalgia for Toys R Us. And he kind of goes down the line and talks about how he knows every toys manufacturer and how it was designed, like every toy in the store,
and he knows what like market it's going after.
Yeah, it's so great. And then also he like sees Barbie and it's like seeing like a jaded ex-girlfriend. He doesn't know how to feel because he's like, what have they done to her? And I also like that because they talk about making this story for Sonic, and there's a moment where they say it stops feeling like they're making up a story and it starts feeling like they're discovering the story of Sonic while they're writing it. And I think that's really cool to make this mascot who they are, where they have the idea like he was friends with the scientist and then the scientist had an experiment that went wrong and it became enemies. And this chapter is just really great. I feel like we get a lot of context of why and how, and also the whole Madeline Schroeder like going to Japan and having these really tense meetings with the Sega of Japan designers, the people who made the mascot, and trying to like compromise to be like, listen, we're trying to tell you what's going to sell in America, and an electric guitar playing giant fanged like hedgehog with a girlfriend named Madonna is not going to work in American toys for the market they're going for, which is kids ages 5 to 12 or something.
Yeah, but they also want the kids that like want to be like their older siblings too. So it's like we need it to be kind of edgy because we want it to appeal sort of to older people, but more to kids who want to be older people. Which I thought is kind of an interesting demographic to go after, which was really a big demographic to go after in the 90s. That was like the hot group of people to go to try to sell your stuff to. Yeah,
I also wanted to mention too that this chapter shows like Shinobu Toyota. There was like a question about his loyalty in the beginning of the book about whether he's a Sega of Japan spy or he really is there to support Sega of America. And he actually they learned, and Tom like tells this, that he learned during this time that Toyota is 100% Sega of America's guy.
Yeah, he's translating things so that they're like not quite as mean as, the other party wants it. Like he's really trying to make this work out for Sega of America.
Yeah, and he also, I don't know if it's this chapter or later on in the book, but there's things that he would do. Like, he would put something on Sonic that was so ridiculous, knowing Sega of Japan would be like, we have to take this off. And he'd agree, so it looks like compromise. But he really is setting up the compromise to make it look like this is what he was doing as a nice gesture of goodwill.
Oh, man. That's a masterful negotiating tactic of like, they never planned to use this dumb thing anyway, but now we can use it as a bargaining chip to get Sega of Japan to do something else.
Yeah, and also, I forgot there was a brief moment they talked about in the book. They're going to do two Sonics. They were going to do a Sega of Japan Sonic and a Sega of America Sonic, and that just got completely shut down because like, there's no way.
Yeah, it's like you can't do that.
Yeah, this is good because I feel like this is the first time we see Nakayama, who is Sega of Japan's president, kind of push Kalinske into making the choice. Because when he asks about the job, he's like, I can do whatever. I have free reign. And he's like, yes. And this is the first time we see, of course, that's not true. You're going to have to fight for things that you want. I love it.
Yeah. And it also foreshadows a bit of the trouble that Sega of Japan is going to have with Sega of America. Like they're going to have trouble working together, which is part of the reason that like the mid 90s stuff doesn't work out for Sega, like the 32X and the Saturn and all that stuff, is because there's just like a breakdown between what Sega of America thinks is the right thing to do and what Sega of Japan thinks is the right thing to do. And so they just end up not really doing anything right. And they kind of have a really rough mid 90s. But we'll get to that later in the book, I think.
Yeah, don't they? Isn't there a thing too where they try to like push out? Kalinske didn't want the Saturn, or he didn't want the Dreamcast. He didn't want one of those.
He didn't want the Saturn. He thought we had a couple more years in the Genesis with the CD and the 32X.
And they could like skip a generation and then go for like, and it would have been the Dreamcast would have been the next thing.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know exactly what his plan was for, because I don't think he would have been like, just skip the Saturn. We'll wait till 1999 and launch the Dreamcast, because that's a really long time to.
Yeah.
I mean, unless he thinks he can get 5 more years out of the Genesis just by putting out the 32X, which obviously didn't work, but maybe he thought that it would have worked. I don't know.
But we'll get to that point.
Yeah.
You're right. We'll get there. Well, this next chapter is probably the most entertaining one of the whole thing, I think. The all tripped up, because Trip Hawkins does not seem like a great person in this book.
No, he does not come off as a hero. And I'm sure there's a book like this about early days of EA where Trip Hawkins is a much cooler character, but not in this book.
Yeah, essentially the background of this chapter is the next mission, if you want to like treat it that way. Like, because it does feel like that. He's like, okay, first mission for Kalinske, go to Walmart. Next mission, figure out Sonic. This one is convince Trip Hawkins to not make his own Sega Genesis cartridges because he reverse engineered the system.
Yeah. And Trip Hawkins knows he's got all the cards here. He's like, what are you going to do about it? We can do this already. We don't need you to make any deal with us at all, because we can totally just do whatever we want right now.
Yeah, and it gets really heated.
Yeah.
It gets like really intense, and they're kind of like jabbering back and forth at each other. But the big thing for me is the deal making that Kalinske does in this chapter is pretty amazing, I feel like, because he has nothing and he kind of flips it into getting a really big deal for him, which is Joe Montana football is essentially a reskinned version of Madden.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets that. But then also because I don't think that Trip Hawkins held all the cards, but I don't think Trip Hawkins realized how much he was helping Kalinske by taking this deal, because Kalinske now has EA like as a close partner. Because they get such cheap royalties. Yeah,
yep. I think that's a really good point. That Trip Hawkins did end up getting a pretty good deal to not just make his own cartridges, and they ended up getting a bunch of money off of, like, they got royalties for Joe Montana football, and I think there was a couple other things. So they probably ended up coming out on top rather than just walking away and making their own cartridges and telling Kalinske to F off.
Yeah, for sure. Also, this is a big moment for us because we get another mention of the we sell the blades, not the razors metaphor.
Yep.
On page 83, which I was like, we got to mark this down because this is a metaphor that comes back probably every 5 episodes on this podcast.
Yeah. Kalinske says, we barely break even on the systems. We're giving away razors in order to sell the blades. And Trip Hawkins says, but they're my blades.
Yeah. Oh man, this is.
Which, who knows if that conversation actually happened? It's not like they got a tape recorder in the room, but I still like it.
I do too. That feels very like movie-esque to me.
Yeah.
It seems like a little Glengarry Glen Ross negotiation things going on here.
Did you watch Pirates of Silicon Valley? Did you ever watch that movie?
No, I never did.
Made for TV movie. It's worth watching. It's got Noah Wyle as Steve Jobs and Anthony Michael Hall as Bill Gates. It's a made for TV movie, and there's a great confrontation scene between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates that is like reminds me of this. It's funny.
I need to watch that. There's a lot of these the TV shows. I mean, again, I didn't watch the Console Wars movie either. That I need to watch. But I guess I want to talk the deal. So in the end, EA takes the deal because you can make 16 games a year, and instead of the $10 for cartridges, they'll charge them $4. And also, Kalinske says they get to reskin Madden as Joe Montana football. And the reason that EA took this deal is because otherwise both companies would be in court forever arguing over this. And that's the big issue.
And EA probably could have won that case. That would be interesting. I don't know if EA's thing or Tengen, I don't remember if those were tested in court. Tengen must not have been tested in court, because I feel like if it had been, then we would have just seen a million other people making NES cartridges, and we really didn't. So it must not have been tested in court. But if EA had taken this to court, they probably could have won. But I don't know. Is it worth it? Probably not.
I think there's even the quote here. It says you'd bankrupt both companies with lawsuits would be bankrupted by this. Is kind of the point Kalinske makes. So in the end, Trip Hawkins did have all the cards, but if he'd have gone through with this whole thing and made his own cartridges and just done it, it would have messed everything up. And Trip Hawkins did win. I mean, he got a way cheaper royalty deal than anyone else. Yep. So there is that. But yeah, he does not look like the hero of this story in any way, shape, or form. The next chapter, chapter 10, is called Extremely Dangerous. And it opens with them going to this, like, kind of like that scene in Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory where they walk in and you can, like, eat anything you want. Mm-hmm. It's like that world, but it's just the AMOA, Amusement Music Operators Association Expo. So it's just video and arcade games lining the walls of this place. And you go to, like, play games, and they kind of are looking to see if they can find game publishers they like for Sega to make games for. It's just like they get to play video games for a living. They even mentioned that in the book.
Yeah, gotta test them out.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It was in 1991. You see a lot of fun stuff here because this whole chapter, they're kind of talking a lot about how Buster Douglas is going to come out soon, the game they made. And you can just feel that they're foreshadowing this is not going to go well. Yeah,
the Buster Douglas boxing game that they're like, if we put out this Buster Douglas boxing game and then he wins, it's going to sell like hotcakes and gangbusters. You're like, oh no.
And you're like, oh no. And so the whole thing is they're going to go to this AMOA Expo, play games, have fun as like a kind of nice little reprieve from all this stuff that's been going on with the company. And then they're going to watch the boxing match later that night and catch Buster Douglas fighting Evander Holyfield.
It was a big fight, big deal.
Big fight, big deal, right? I love this too because you learn that, I mean, they bring it up, and I knew this already, but I kind of forgot that Mike Tyson's Punch-Out used to be just called Punch-Out.
Yeah, it was briefly just Punch-Out. Was it ever just Punch-Out on the NES, or was that like the arcade version?
I think it was exactly. The arcade version was Punch-Out. I could be wrong. And then, because they talk about how essentially they did the same thing they took a game called Final Blow, which was made by Taito, and then they busterized it, is what they called it, which I thought was funny, where they changed the main character to be Buster Douglas instead of who it was before, which is called Detroit Kid was the name of the character before, I guess.
Oh.
So they're doing that. They're all excited. They go to the boxing match, and you just feel it is going to go wrong. And not only does it go wrong, it's also like Buster Douglas has gained like a bunch of weight and is way overweight for the boxing match, which is a problem. And then he gets just destroyed in the third round by Evander Holyfield and loses. And they're both just looking at each other saying, this is our big game. This is the big game that's supposed to come out this year.
This is what we bet on. Oh no.
And I love it too, because they kind of both go to bed sad that night, and then they each figure something out, about what they're gonna do. And that's the most, and this is kind of where we see the beginnings of the strategy of marketing for Sega. And that is that Kalinske watches this TV commercial about bungee jumping and Nike Air shoes. Yeah, do you remember that part? I thought it was so funny. And it's like an edgy, kind of sarcastic, clever, and fun like ad. And that's the tone that they're going to set with their Sega ads. They want to be that like edgy company. We're going to make fun of Nintendo a little bit. We're going to be the cool guys. We're not even going to care. And Kalinske has this idea the night of, and then stays up really late into the night, like working on this. And the next morning, Nilsson has the same kind of thought process of the same tone of, we're just going to own this. We're going to make it like a joke that we made this boxing game. And just, yeah, we messed up. And that's how we're going to sell the boxing game. The full title of the game, by the way, is James Buster Douglas Knockout Boxing, which seems very long. But that boxing game, they end up selling millions of copies of it. They have to reorder it, and they make it a Sega classic, quote unquote, like fully just owning the fact that this is such a stupid idea.
And then we're going to make this boxing game for this guy who just got his butt kicked big time.
Yeah, and we're going to make it a Sega classic. So I like this. This is the chapter, I think, where we figure out like what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And it's all based on this really like happy to sad moment, but then a moment of like realizing how it's going to work.
I love it.
I do too. I love it so much. And then the last chapter here, the last one is very, very short. It's called Lightning in a Bottle. I said it was 2 pages. I lied. It was definitely like less than 2 pages.
Yeah, it's so short. Wow.
It is so short. And it pretty much covers them getting the Sonic demo. Is it? I guess it's not a demo. It's just like a minute-long video, huh?
Yeah, it's a demonstration of the game. I guess technically this would be a demo in the sense that it was a demonstration, not necessarily a playable like short section of the game. I think it was just, they probably just got mailed a tape or something.
Yeah, in my mind, it's just them like getting a VHS tape and putting it into a player, and they have to mess with the tracking for a good minute, and then they're like, "This looks great."
Honestly, that's probably what happened. Like, this was all dial-up internet back in those days. Like, nobody was making this video on a computer and sending it to him, you know?
Yeah, and essentially the Sonic the Hedgehog tape they watch, they're all blown away because the speed, we all know old Sonic now, you know, it's 2022. This was the 90s. It's all about speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have this moment where they talk to Nilsson. I liked it, and they clearly didn't understand he was being sarcastic when he's like, it's just okay. They love it so much that they brought all the employees in to watch it. So every Sega of America employee, which I'm assuming is not that many at this time.
It must not have been, yeah.
Is like, wow, we can really sell this. We can really do this. This is it. And on top of all that, they got it as far as they figured out what Sonic looks like. They made him edgy but adorable. Rebellious but adorable, I think is the term they used.
Yeah, he looked adorable, but he had a cool like background of being all cool. I don't know.
No, that's a great way to put it. A cool background
of being all cool.
Being all cool. We'll do that thing where he like shook his finger at the camera. Real sassy, that Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, sure is.
So yeah, this is kind of where we're going to end today, because it ends with them saying, now this is time for Kalinske to go tell Japan what he's going to do. This is kind of a cliffhanger moment.
Yeah. And it says at the end, so somebody says, we're going to sell 1 million of these. And Kalinske says, no, we're not. We're not going to sell a single one of these. And that's what I'm going to tell Japan. But that's where we leave it. Like, what is he doing? What's the plan here? What's he going to do?
What's happening? Oh, it's so great. This book really gets the whole like cliffhangery. It feels like I'm just reading a novel, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much. I feel like I'm going to say that every single week. Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, this week I talked about Dark Forces a little bit. I'm probably going to fall off of playing Dark Forces, mostly because of how hard it is to see. It's so low resolution. It's like actually hurting my eyes at this point to when I stare at it for like an hour. Like it's just not good. But it's also like super maze-like, and I'm like a quarter of the way through the game, and I can tell it just gets more and more complicated from here. And then I'm just like, I don't know if I have the patience for the rest of this, but I played a little bit more Dark Forces. I played some more Majora's Mask 3D. I'm going into the second temple now, and I gotta beat that one. That's the Goron one, I think. So I'm pretty excited for that. I do want to play the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game because it's on Game Pass. So we should fire that up one of these days. And of course,
Is it a co-op game?
Yeah.
Oh, dude. Yeah, we got to play that tonight.
Yeah.
I'm down.
All
That
right.
sounds so fun.
Yeah, dude. And then, of course, Destiny. Always playing Destiny. I feel like there's something else I was playing this week, too. I'm about to get back into Persona 5 Strikers, I think, because I want to finish that game before Persona 5 Royal hits PC in October on Game Pass.
Oh, yeah. I'm super excited for Persona 5 Royal to come to Xbox Game Pass. I am going to play this.
Yeah. What have you been playing?
I have been playing... Well, I had kind of an interesting week. I was like going to be like all in on The Witcher this week. And then I forgot that the Jurassic World Evolution 2 expansion came out. So I've been obsessively playing that.
Ooh. How's that?
It's really fun. It's like the Biosyn expansion, which is based on the movies. So the movie came out. I saw it. It's got dinosaurs. It's fine. Is it the best story in the world? Probably not, but it's fine. That was my review, really briefly. The game, though, kind of does the prequel of what happened in between Jurassic World's Fallen Kingdom and this Jurassic World Dominion movie. So it kind of talks about that. Super fun. And they have a new Chaos Theory map, which is a what-if scenario. And then they added a bunch of challenge maps, too. And I've been kind of playing the challenge maps, like, casually over the last, 6 months because I want to do them on the hardest difficulty. And I have beaten some of them on the hardest difficulty. It's just takes a long time. So it's very much a casual thing. But on top of Destiny, I picked up Hades again randomly this week.
Oh, yeah.
I started playing Hades again because I never beat Hades. And
Me
I was
either.
like, I like this game. I just kind of stopped playing it. And I did 3 or 4 runs in that. That's great for that. I think that my thing is I come home after school, after work, and I go ahead and I play a run of Hades, and then I'm just done for until next day. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, you just slowly make your way through it.
I love the way that game tells you the story too. Even though you lose a run, it's fine because there's always more story to have and learn.
Yeah.
And so it's fun. And I was getting pretty close. I'm trying to beat Elysium right now. I think I've gotten past Elysium once, and I was so close. One of the runs this week, I had the guy down. It's 2 bosses you fight in the 3rd tier in Elysium. And I killed one of them, and the other one was really low. And then I died, and I was like, oh, man. But it was fine because, yeah, you go back there, and then you talk to people, and I'm trying to romance the giant floating head.
All right.
Cleans the place, that's what I'm trying to do. She's who I chose to romance in the game.
Well, best of luck to you on the giant head.
I'm trying. I'm trying my best. But yeah, if you want to, you could send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can also join our Discord. And the way you do that is either by sending us an email, or you go to my Twitter page at @meetcoletta, and on the pinned tweet, there is an invite that never expires. You can always click on that and join our Discord. Tyler's on Twitter at SneakerElf. Kind of a shorter episode this week, but it is Father's Day. So I'm just going to say Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. All the dads listening. This is for you. This one's for you. And I'm winking. You can't see it, but I did.
I believe you.
Thanks. Do you want to say bye to everybody before we go?
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.